Howdy folks, I got hold of a fun bottle of Mexican corn whiskey here recently, so I thought I would do one of those videos where we sort of make a cocktail, go through the thought process of balancing the cocktail. I'm going to use the Nixta corn liqueur as well, because that seems like the right move. Hopefully it'll turn out good. Let's go. So I got this corn whiskey from the mezcal club I belong to called Maguey Malate. If you're not familiar with Maguey Malate for a price, they will send you two half bottles, 375s of mezcal every other month. They'll travel around Mexico finding special, unique bottles of mezcal from very small producers. They'll buy the batch directly from the producer, and then they import it here to America. It's pretty awesome. They'll also sometimes include little sample bottles of other things that you could then go on the website and buy if you wanted to. Recently, there was a sample of this corn whiskey, and I decided that I had to have it. It's made by a fellow named Tomas Nava Lancaster. He lives in a place called San Luis Potosi. It is a state of Mexico, sort of a little to the east, but not all the way, just north of Mexico City, and he makes corn whiskey. Now, Maguey Malate like to put out little interviews, sometimes little short videos about their producers. There's a pretty good video of just sort of him chatting about mezcal and corn whiskey and what he's up to. I'll put a link to it because it's pretty interesting. He used to make mezcal and then decided to switch over into corn whiskey when he heard about what Abasala was doing. He also makes a gin that's made out of prickly pear, which sounds kind of awesome. Now, he first learned to make mezcal, but has moved into corn whiskey. Partially, it sounds like that's for sustainability reasons. There's a big demand for agave right now, and Mexico makes a ton of corn, mostly to eat. But if there's an overage, you can always distill it. And unlike the corn they grow in America, the corn in Mexico mostly isn't, genetically modified, owned by big corporations. It still has its nutritional value and its flavor, and there's a ton of different varieties. So he's making whiskey from various different varieties of corn that grow down in Mexico. This particular variety, I guess, is called Hickory King. I think that's the variety of corn that they're using. And let's just give it a taste, see what we think. It's got that corny pozole tortilla flavor that you really, really strongly on the nose. It's aged in American white oak barrels, but only for 6 months. But it's pretty dark, and it's got a little bit of a woody bite. I think the state he's living in is a pretty warm place, and when you age things in very warm places, they can take on a lot of wood character pretty quickly. So anyway, it's delicious. Let's get on to the drink. Now, the base of this drink is going to be this Hickory King corn whiskey, and we're going to include the Nixta Elote corn liqueur, which I discussed previously. Now, when I first started playing around with this, I decided to try just a 2-ingredient cocktail, just the whiskey and the elote. The thing is, that was too corny. It's just overwhelmingly corn flavored. And the other thing about it is that the Nixta doesn't sweeten a drink as much as you think it might. It itself is pretty sweet, but the savoriness of the corn, it just doesn't transmit sweetness to the palate the way you might think it would, as I discussed in the previous video about Nixta. Now, to make this drink a little bit more interesting and complex, I decided to add some Smokey Scotch. Now, this should be a smoky, savory element that should temper the corniness of the drink a little bit, sort of like a delicious taco. And in that vein, we're going to put some mole bitters in for a little bit of extra flavor. I'm going to put in a couple drops of the Hellfire bitters that I got recently, just for a little bit of spiciness. I'm also going to put in a bar spoon of simple syrup. I like my drinks a little bit sweeter than some people. Now, I made this last night, and I decided it needed a little bit of a fruity element, something to round it out a little bit. I was thinking maybe creme de mure or creme de cassis, which I don't actually happen to have right now, but I do have a blackberry liqueur that I made myself from the Dunnings of the blackberry shrub. But what I decided to do was go with cherry bounce. If you're not familiar with cherry bounce, I've got a ton of videos on that subject. And if you're keeping score, I'm using the unspiced cherry bounce in this. All right, I think that's all you need to know. Let's mix it up. We did it. What are we calling this drink? I don't even know. Let's take a look. It looks beautiful, of course. You don't really need a garnish on here, I feel like, because it smells a lot like the corn. So let's give it a taste. Corny, but moderated by the smoke. I upped the smoke a little bit from yesterday's version, and it's like this nice savoriness. But I think I've put in enough sweetness. Just a little hint of cherry. Like you'd be hard pressed to say there was cherry in here, but it gives it a slight round fruitiness, sort of in the aftertaste. Let's have another sip. That's pretty exciting. It's definitely corn forward, but it's got this sort of smoky up front, very corny, and then like this sort of nice fruity sweetness to finish up. I think that's great. It's, I don't really love spicy things, so I only put in a couple drops of the Hellfire bitters, but if you liked it spicier, you could of course spice it up to your taste. Anyway, I think that's pretty good. Now, I understand that most people aren't going to be getting hold of this very small batch corn whiskey. I will leave a link to where you can buy it if you do want to. It's a little bit expensive, but I thought maybe we could run through a couple of alternatives that I haven't tried, but of course you are free to try. First, of course, would be the Abasolo. That's the whiskey made in the same manner as this, from a place called Abasolo. That's actually owned by Pernod Ricard, a pretty big company. I'm assuming it's going to start getting more wide distribution and end up showing up here in Oregon. If it does, of course, I'm going to buy it. But for now, I can't really get it. The other one I thought of that might be good would be Balcones Baby Blue. That's like a corn whiskey aged in Texas. That's going to be very dark, pretty rich, and might go pretty well with the Nixta. So that's a second idea you could try. Anyway, hopefully that was helpful and or entertaining. Go ahead and leave a like, subscribe if you haven't done so. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.